You know, riding in the cab of a locomotive is not something very many people get to do, and fewer still get to climb inside a classic passenger diesel from the 50s. This is Southern Railway number 6901, an Electro-Motive Division E8A built in 1951. You can find it at the Southeastern Railway Museum in Duluth, Georgia, which is just outside Atlanta. To your average guest, it may seem like just another part of the museum's vast collection, but this old locomotive has a real connection to the Atlanta area. 6901 pulled Southern Railway's famous Crescent passenger train, which ran from New York City to New Orleans. And the locomotive was the last Southern Railway engine to lead the Crescent before Amtrak took over the service in 1979. That distinction is ultimately why the Southern Railway decided to donate the locomotive. Of course, the Southern is now a fallen flag. It merged with Norfolk and Western in 1982 to form Norfolk Southern. But Amtrak's Crescent still passes by the museum here in Duluth. Back inside 6901, it really feels like you've gone back in time, but there have been some updates to keep the engine running. One of the big additions was a TMV microprocessor-based control system installed by Norfolk Southern. Here's a shot of its traction engine control system. And this screen may seem a little out of place on a machine from the 50s, but it allows the operator to monitor what the various systems on the locomotive are doing. 6901 is now a part of the digital age, but it hasn't lost much of its analog charm. Its Nathan P5 air horn will certainly get your attention. To many people, a trip aboard a train is all about the journey, watching the scenery go by, and getting a first-hand look at our country. The folks who worked inside this cab would have had a front row seat, but what's left of some of those locations that the engineer and fireman would have seen out of these windows? Well, we're not going to travel the entire route of the Crescent today, but remnants of 6901's old stomping grounds in Atlanta are still standing. This is Peachtree Station in the city's Brookwood neighborhood. The letters above the entrance make the building's heritage known to passengers, visitors, and anyone traveling down Atlanta's famous Peachtree Street. This station is more than 100 years old. It was opened in 1918. These days, the Crescent is the only Amtrak train serving Atlanta. You can almost imagine 6901 sounding its horn for this crossing near the station. Retirement is on the horizon for locomotives like this GE P42DC. They're being replaced on long-haul trains with more modern Siemens chargers. This train, Amtrak number 19, will soon be headed toward Birmingham, Alabama, and ultimately to New Orleans. It won't even get near downtown Atlanta. But before the days of Amtrak, the city had a grand passenger rail facility at the site of what's now the Richard B. Russell Federal Building. Terminal Station opened in 1905. It was torn down in 1972. One of the most visible remnants of the station, this old interlocking tower, stood for many years before it was taken down in 2018. But next door, this building is a survivor. And like Peachtree Station, the letters here spell out its heritage. This structure contained offices for the Southern Railway. It was built in 1912 and housed various railroad departments like engineering, operations, and car accounting. The building was recently renovated and it still overlooks the tracks. With the closing of Terminal Station in 1970, the Southern Crescent stopped coming down here, but 6901 continued to pass by this location. Engines would be changed out when the Crescent got to Peachtree Station, and this is part of the route those locomotives would have taken to get to the Atlanta Motor Shop for servicing. This facility was also known as Pegram Shops. Lloyd Neal captured this picture of 6901 at Pegram in 1976. You'll notice the engine is wearing a red and white banner marking America's bicentennial. The Southern serviced many of its diesel locomotives here. This image from 1973 shows EMD F units wearing this sharp tuxedo paint scheme. And here's another shot, showing some more Southern E units. Southern's main line going south to Macon also passes by here. These high-head locomotives are long gone now, but this line is still active. But there's next to no activity on the rails once used by the shop. And the turntable that used to be here, well, it's long gone, but you can still make out where it was. It's amazing this sign hasn't been completely consumed by kudzu. Norfolk Southern no longer uses Pegram shops, but I believe they still own it and lease it to Collier Metals. Believe it or not, the Fulton County property records online actually still say Southern Railway Company on them. Oh, and lately, production companies have been filming movies and TV shows here. You may have seen this property in The Walking Dead. Back in Duluth, we've stopped at the museum shop to get some interesting facts on 6901 from Randy, who's our engineer today.
General Motors did use some common parts from their automotive division, like a lot of these window cranks and stuff were from their car lines.
Having windows that open is really important in here. There's no air conditioning. But I would imagine you'd get a pretty good breeze if you actually got it up to the speed it was designed to run.
This engine is geared to run 99 miles an hour, still, even now. And we won't be doing that today.
Now, you may think 6901 wore this classy Southern Crescent paint scheme throughout its career. Well, it actually looked a little different a couple decades ago. Here it is, looking more like a Central of Georgia engine during its time with the New Georgia Railroad. That railroad was short-lived. It pulled excursion trains in the 1980s and early 90s. Photographer Stuart Lodge captured 6901 in a variety of locations, including here at the Pullman Yard. The New Georgia maintained its equipment here, but long before that, passenger cars belonging to the Pullman Company were serviced at this property. It's now owned by Atomic Entertainment and rented out for various events. Now the Pullman Yard is right next to CSX rails, and here's another picture of 6901 on down the line. Since we're comparing the past with the present, this Georgia Railroad bridge in Lithonia is still standing too. It appears CSX hasn't forgotten about its heritage. This locomotive wears Georgia Railroad decals. The Georgia Railroad is also well represented at the Southeastern Railway Museum. 1026 is another product of GM's Electro-Motive Division. It's a GP7 that was built in 1950. Its design is pretty utilitarian, but E-units like 6901 were supposed to look sleek and stylish. From the portholes on the sides to the streamlined front end, they don't make them like this anymore. And like 6901, the structures and machines we've seen today were also built to last. In a city like Atlanta, where progress seems to be the main priority and the preservation of history is often overlooked, it's amazing that pieces of our past like Peachtree Station, Pegram shops, and 6901 are, in one way or another, still serving the South. A big thanks to Lloyd, Neal, and Stuart Lodge for tracking down some of the photos they've taken of 6901 over the years. And thanks to the Southeastern Railway Museum for inviting me on this ride. If you want to learn more about them, head over to train-museum.org. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.